Mitako Yapi, Wichakpi Yamani Yamachi Yapi. My name is Elanore Three Stars, and I'm Oglala Lakota, born on the Pine Ridge Reservation where my father Peter was born. My mother is Minnie Koju from the Cheyenne River Reservation, which is also one of the Lakota bands. We come from the 7 Lakota bands that make up the Teton division of the Ocheti Shikowi, the 7 council fires. So our ancestral lands include Hesapa, the Black Hills, and that is where, that's a sacred site where our creation story lives. So I'm glad that you're with us today.
Excellent, thanks Elanore. And Edith, how about yourself?
Yeah, hi, I am Edith Woodley. I am Eastern Shoshone and Choctaw. I grew up on the Wind River Indian Reservation in Wyoming, and with my father's people. And I visited Oklahoma, where my mother is from, Southeast Oklahoma in the Choctaw land. So yeah, that I grew up there, and I am descended from a lot of different, you know, people who are pretty, who have really given me a lot to think about in my own life and why I'm here.
Awesome. Well, I feel really grateful. I always have a lot of fun when I'm with both of you. And I wanted to make sure that we talked about Elahe and what it is and what each of our own connection to Elahe is. For me, I first encountered Elahe, and we're going to talk about it a lot. So if you're new to the Elahe community, elahe.org, you can learn a little bit more about the community there. But I was in my master's program. Randy Woodley was one of my professors. I was living in Portland at that time. And so he was like, well, hey, why don't you come on over to our farm? I had no idea it would be the beginning of a long journey of relationship together. But what was so really precious to me about the experience of being able to be at Elahe multiple times and be in relationship with both of you and learn from both of you, and then eventually bring people there to learn with you, was it took the journey of decolonizing and liberation and indigenizing, and it took it kind of out of abstraction and gave me a place to be where I could start to think about a new way to move forward. And I think in all the deconstructing and decolonizing grief, it was such a gift to have a place to not just think about what I was critiquing, but be invited into a better way. And that it was in this land, in this place with you all held in relationship in this really embodied way was really transformational. And it's why for me, over the last over a year, I've been part of the Resurrect Elahe campaign and co-chairing that, because I actually really believe that everybody should have a chance to be at Elahe for what it could mean for growth and transformation and finding a new way to be with, to follow creator. So it's, people are like, wait, like what's your relationship with Elahe? And I'm like, I don't know, it's my secret part-time job because I love it so much. And I just want to see it happen. So that's just a little bit of my backstory. Maybe Edith, if you could tell us more as the co-creator, co-sustainer of Elahe, what it is and what you do and what some of the values are that you have there.
Oh, wow.
And everything.
That is a lot of information.
Go.
But I will try to, like this. Elahe, just real quick, the Elahe, how it was even came to be was at least 21 years ago. It came from a dream that Randy had one night, and it was pretty powerful because he woke me up and he was so excited. I mean, if you've ever seen Randy excited about something, he was really excited about this. And so he had to share it with me in the middle of the night. And here I am pregnant with our youngest son. And I was like, okay. And so he tells me about this thing as like this dream. And I was like, wow, that is beautiful. And, you know, and so we both started crying that,
Mm.
can this really happen? Could we really do this? You know, could the creator really let this happen in our lives? And so we went on this journey looking and praying and trying to seek a place where Elohei could come to fruition, I guess that's the word.
Mhm.
And, you know, it just to come alive.
Mhm.
And, you know, we've been through all these different trials and errors, and, you know, we had several places where people said, oh yeah, we'll give you this land for $1 a year, blah, 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 and so on and so on. We ended up in Kentucky, we got chased off. And, you know, that's how we ended up here in Oregon.
Mm.
And so, yeah, and now we are in our new place. It is beautiful. If you haven't seen pictures of it, it's gorgeous. The sunsets are just beautiful. I mean, we haven't seen a sunset in the past week because of all the smoke. And, you know, keeping our eyes on the ears and eyes on the news, making sure that, you know, we're not having to get ready to vacate.
Yeah.
But this place is beautiful. And, you know, just, I don't know how to describe it. It's just beautiful, and it's raw.
Mm.
And Randy and I are working it, and we're trying to create Elohei where everybody could come once this pandemic is over with,
Yes.
you know. And I can't wait. I can't wait to start cooking for people. I can't wait to have people running around, and Randy's working on the campground, and you know, I don't know, I could just go on and on, but Elohei is for me is a magic place right now, because it's our home.
Mm.
And we just want to share it.
Yeah. I cannot wait for this pandemic to be over so that we can actually I haven't had a chance even to visit Elohei's new location. And then the dream is to host schools and learning gatherings there and be on Elohei together. So this online cohort is kind of because we can't go to Elohei right now, we can sort of create this online community to do some of the learning. It's not the same, but it just, you know, we're all trying to make the best, right, of the circumstance.
Definitely. Yeah.
Also, I want to say hi to your son Redbird, who's jumped on with us. So hi, Redbird, welcome to.
Hey, Birdie.
One of my favorite Redbird memories is being at Elohei in Newburgh and picking chamomile together on a super hot day.
You were with us on that day?
I
Oh
was.
my God.
We were picking chamomile, and I was like, I will never take 1 cup of chamomile for granted again, because each little flower is tiny, and we were hand picking them. And Redbird's just a teenager, and he was out there with headphones on, like listening to some like serious rock and roll music, but like picking the chamomile, like an angry teenager. And I was out here just like getting sunburned trying to like pick these little flowers. So it's a very fond memory of being at Elohei. Lenore, how about yourself? Do you want to tell us a little bit about what your relationship with Elohei is and how it's?
Well, I kind of like to go back to Edith for a minute, because one of the most compelling parts of the Elohei story is what you guys actually built in Kentucky. And you kind of glossed over the part where you got ran out of Kentucky, but it was a huge trauma.
Mm.
Yeah, it was. But, you know, it was, we were building everything. You know, we had every animal that you could think of. And we had from horses and cows and ducks and sheep and goats and chickens, guineas. We didn't have turkeys, so, and we had a dog and we had cats. And so, you know, we had the whole gamut of everything. And, you know, it was 50 acres. And it was a beautiful piece. And it had this beautiful river or creek just right down the road from us that was on our property, and you could hear it at night if you had the windows open. But, you know, I guess people just didn't want us to be around there because of the, you know, a little thing called racism, white supremacy and racism. And, you know, have you guys heard about that word?
Yeah. Yeah. Is that
So,
something in the United, has the United States experienced that? I don't know. Like, is that something that,
yeah,
like,
but you know what's even worse is that, you know, the racism didn't, yeah, the people, the neighborhood, the racism came from our neighbors, right? But the real racism came from the offices that we tried to get help with, fair housing, the sheriff's department, the all these different agencies that we went to say, hey, wait, they can't do this to us. You know, they can't put up a gun, a machine gun on the edge of our property and shoot, even though they're not shooting at us, but they're, you know, it's like, it's right there. We have animals, we have, our boys were little and they ran all over the place, you know, like little boys do, right? They just run everywhere. And so that was where the real racism came to be, is from the government offices that we tried to get help with. So.
And if you want, and if people want to hear more of that story, we actually made a video kind of telling some of that story about Elanore, which at that time was holding like schools. There was, you know, people were staying in bunkhouses there. There was like job training. There was a lumber mill. I mean, there was just this like whole thing going on. And then because there was this whole streak of white supremacists who literally did put guns up on the property line and made it really unsafe for you all to be there and having to leave in kind of crisis. If you want that, that's that we tell some of that story in a video we made about Elanore, which is on the Elanore GoFundMe page. So that's a lot of grief, and part of why I have, you know, I've seen the grief and the trauma that Randy and Edith have come through and continued to hold the vision for Elanore in spite of all of that. And so I just respect that you haven't given up on the dream, even though you really, it's been a tumultuous journey. So I just can't wait to.
You know, there's these things called valleys and hills and mountains, you know, that, you know, you get in the valley and it's really, you know, it's like, oh, but then once you get to the top of the hill, I feel like that's where we are now. You know, we're at that top of that hill and we're just really, you know, I can't wait till these cohorts can actually become cohorts here. And it'd be great.
Yeah. Well, that's a real vision when it doesn't let you go.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I think my connection to Elanore is really a part of my spiritual journey. I started following Jesus when I was already an adult with a 6-year-old kid, you know, so we were in the same level as of Sunday school. And it was definitely a struggle for me to get over that threshold of Christianity being the white man's religion. And it wasn't because I was like this traditional Indian, or I was coming from the zeitgeist of Native activism against broken treaties when I was in college then. And so I was super wary of being proselytized into the colonizers' religion. But after I graduated, I lived with my dad and his second family for a year with my son. And out of respect, I went to church with them. And it's just through family and new friends that I was loved over that threshold of that religion being the white man's religion. And I have to say, it wasn't that I was shamed or converted. I really don't like that word. That's too conquest language sounding to me. And I wasn't won by the right evangelistic tactics. Those are the things that I don't respond to. But what I did respond to was this long relational learning process that enabled me to trust that Jesus is who he says he is, and that he did what he said he did, and that he loves us. So for the next 23 years or so, my faith was shaped in this Western context of Christianity. I was a really good white Christian woman. And I didn't have an understanding at that time that this religion was known for imposing its Euro culture template on civilizing and Christianizing natives. But there were things that I experienced that helped me understand. My dad had used his GI Bill to get a teaching degree. So we eventually moved off the reservation, and we're urban Indians, like the majority of Native peoples. We go back and forth from city to reservation. And I think that acculturation of being an urban Indian helped me accept the dualities and that the dualities in Christian religion as truth. But, you know, there were some areas of conflict. Like, I always heard stuff like, this world is not my home, I'm only passing through it, or that kind of thing devalues the sacredness of earth. And so when you look around and you see what's happening to earth, and yet we're good Christian people, some of those things didn't make sense. What is secular? What is sacred? I love powwows, and I learned that I couldn't call an eagle feather sacred because that meant I was being an idolater. You know, and what happens to those people? Well, they go to hell, and I didn't want to do that. So there were a lot of conflicts that I had to deal with. Church became one more place like school where I couldn't really be too Indian. So I figured there must be something wrong. You know, you start thinking, is there something wrong with me being Indian? So at that time then, I was in my career in Seattle in civil rights, and I met Richard Twiss, and he told me that he had gone through that same experience with other people, and that this group of people had gotten their PhDs and got this program accredited through the North George Fox Seminary. And he said, you should apply there. And so I did, and Randy got me through the door at the last minute. And so I retired and I moved to Spokane, and I started NATES all in 1 week, just about, because my heart was like, I had to be able to follow Jesus as a Lakota woman. And how did I do that? And that I learned is decolonizing your theology. So that was my connection with Elohim, and I graduated, and now I'm on the board of Elohim, and now I'm doing this for Elohim. So
I love it. I love it. Well, and that's where I got to meet you, Lenore, was that we were in class together. Right. Ever so often. And then we ended up going to some conferences together and having some fun and struggles and fun.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You got an education.
You call those struggles? I would call them nightmares.
What we're referring to is basically we attended this conference, it went sideways. We had a few different experiences where it was very problematically, it was supposed to be about Indigenous issues, but problematically led by white folks. But it did give me an opportunity, actually, I think to me, where I was like, oh my God, this is some of this badass Indigenous grandma power, because we were in a space together. We were in kind of what is supposed to be this like talking circle, healing circle conversation. And I think that you had shared some of your story, Edith, and just some of your own family's history with Indian boarding schools. And then there was these really problematic, like false equivalencies made about like the white experience. And I was like, oh my God, there's a fight about it. Well, I could feel the anger coming up, but instead of like yelling in response, Lenore was like, I'm going to have to tell y'all a story right now. And I was like, what's happening right now? And then you, after Lenore finished her story, you were like, I also must tell a story right now. And I was like, is this how these women are going to kick these people's asses? Like, they're just, I was like, and I was like, oh, I don't think people even know they're mad. But these stories were meant to be this like amazing gift of correction. And it was such an amazing learning experience for me to see like, oh, if you're listening, you understand that you are getting your ass kicked right now. But if you're not listening, you're totally just like, oh, are these ladies just telling neat stories? You know, and I could just see that it was people were doing kind of a like, that's neat that those Indian ladies are telling that story. And then a few folks were like, we're getting our asses kicked right now about. And so I just thought that was, for me, a deeper understanding of like, oh, oral culture isn't just like story time culture, but it is this profound teaching tool, but you have to want to learn from it. It's not forced on you. This kind of like, you have to opt into the learning. And I was like, oh boy. And I just felt like, wow, we need to create more spaces for that learning. Sorry, Edith, go ahead.
You know, with story time, I mean, it's not just like, oh, you give your child a story, right? But with Indian stories, there's like two meanings to them, right? And there's a reason why we tell our stories. It's not just to pacify the kids or say, okay, kids, you guys got to learn from this. But it's a deeper. It's kind of like that thing called what's the story behind the story? And it's like it's a lot deeper. And if you don't get that deeper meaning from the story, then it is just a story, right? So the stories that our ancestors told us, they were the ones that they not only instructed us, but it also had a spiritual, deep heart, spiritual thing to it. And I'm sure a lot of the kids just thought, oh, that's a great story. But deep inside, it was like when they went out into the world doing the things that kids do, I'm sure it stopped them at certain things and go, oh, wait, you know, there's that, and it hits them in the heart and in their soul, in their spirit. So, yeah.
Yeah, they talk about the Bible being a living word because you can continually learn more from it, depending on where you are in your spiritual journey. And that's the strength of an oral culture, is that you don't tell the story just once. It's told and retold, and the more you hear it, the more you learn. And even now, you know, like when I was in school, I could get more out of the stories that I already knew. Stories of how creation cooperated with Creator to come up with the answer to whatever the problem was, and that we weren't just given the answer, but we had to participate because we were a community. Those are the kind of things you don't pick up when you're a kid, but the kinds of things that I continue to pick up on.
Well, and that just has been really profound for me to both observe and then learn from, because it's like, if you come in a lot of like Western spaces, you know, knowledge is sort of forced on you. In Christian spaces and educational spaces, like, this is what it is, take it in, memorize it. It's very top down. It's very, the recipient is kind of passive, like, but then this, in oral culture, there's this sort of part, you have to want to know more. You have to want to like go beyond the story behind the story. You have to hear the story multiple times. Lenore, when you were teaching for this cohort of women leaders that I was leading, you shared a story with us from your own culture and tribe. And then we were all like, what's this mean? What's that represent? What's the bird? Like, what's the animal? And you were super kind, but in your very kick-ass way, you were like, what you're doing is very Western right now. You're trying to master the story and master the knowledge. And you're like, maybe just ask the question, from what I do understand, how can it make me a better relative? And that kind of like schooled the room. We just went quiet for a moment because man, I think that so much of what we've been taught is like, just accumulate knowledge, even about following Jesus. And it doesn't have to make you a better relative. It just knowing more is something you can lord over people. And to go like, it isn't about knowing more. It's about becoming a good relative from what you know. That paradigm shift that you gave really pivoted things for me. And I can see how Jesus is using that same model, like parables, like you got to want to know more, you got to ask questions, or you just think it's like an interesting agricultural story and on you go. So it's been helpful to me too.
I was doing a Doctrine of Discovery workshop with Jim Sakara one time, and the turtle is significant in his Hawaiian culture, the same as it is in Native culture. And we were talking about this turtle that helped with creation. And there was a mother who came, and she didn't know that her kid's school was going to be dismissed that day. So she had to bring her kids with her. So there's a 12-year-old girl, and she raised her hand and she wanted to know, where did that turtle come from? And so I explained to her, that's the way you're taught in school, and that's the way you're tested, is you have to get these facts and then report on them. And I said, but what if you just listen to the message? What is the message of this story? If you know about Jesus sacrificed himself, can you see that grandmother turtle sacrificed? I mean, there's a value of sacrifice here. And so listen for the message behind the story. And her mother sent me an email like a couple of weeks later and said she was listening to her daughter teach in Sunday school, and her daughter encountered that kind of question, and the daughter told those kids, just listen for the message behind the story. And I just thought, holy cow, out of that whole room of, theologians and professors that came from Whitworth, there's that little girl that made my day.
I love it. That's so fantastic.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, and that's one of the things, I do want to invite for folks who are joining us on Facebook, if learning more about the things we're talking about is something that you're interested in, I do want to invite you to participate in this cohort that you all are going to be helping to lead. So the cohort is under Liberated Together. So that cohort is for women of color. And if you want to learn more about oral culture, decolonizing theology, the history of the Indian boarding schools, the journey of reclaiming culture and ceremony, environmental justice, the doctrine of discovery, if that's stuff you want to learn more from, those are things that Elanore and Edith, as well as a few other of their friends that they've invited in, are going to be talking about. So I'm very excited for that space. Is there just anything that you want to say about kind of why you think it's important for people to be like just learning about those topics, or just what it means to be inviting people to learn from Indigenous grandmas about those things?
Well, one thing I gave after one of my sermons about decolonizing my theology, the people that came up and asked me questions about wanting to decolonize their theology, they were white. And that really surprised me. And so I can see that we all want the same thing. We all want to follow the truth.
I love that.